And you asked her to call Charlie and tell him what happened, right?
Yes.
You didn't speak with Charlie that day, right?
I don't think so.
On July 19th, the next day, you spoke to Charlie at 10:50 in the morning. Is that, you won't know the exact time, but do you recall speaking with him in the morning?
I honestly don't.
Do you recall letting him know that Professor Markel had passed away in the early morning?
I don't remember the conversation.
When your parents came directly to Tallahassee, correct?
They did.
They stopped in Orlando and they got there on the morning of the 19th, right?
Yes.
And when they got there, they were scared and frantic, right?
Yes.
Your dad didn't sleep. He couldn't get police protection, so he's planted his chair in the front of your window to make sure that no one was going to come to your house and shoot it up, right?
Correct.
Now, you all attended a memorial service on the 20th, right?
Yes.
And you arranged for the Markels to see the boys after the memorial service, right?
They all came over to my house.
And you left Tallahassee, correct?
Not on the 20th. No.
On the 21st.
Yes.
And when you left Tallahassee on the 21st, did you bring all your belongings?
I brought some swimsuits for the boys and some pajamas, and I thought we'd be back in a day or two.
And when you left, you were not yourself.
I was a mess.
You got to South Florida and you realized that you could not take care of the boys alone at this point in time.
I hadn't slept in days and I was terrified.
To get a little more specific, you wouldn't leave the house.
No.
And you would hardly eat.
I wasn't eating, no.
And ultimately, you decided not to come back to Tallahassee.
I mean, I made that decision much later, but...
Greg, what do you got?
So here we go. This is the first time she says, I don't think so. She's been very specific to now. So this is a yes or no question, and she's being led in this thing. Her blink rate, Chase, this is one of those great opportunities for us to talk about the difference in blink rate and shutter speed, because she goes into her processor speed causes her blink to flutter. It's not the same thing as a high blink rate. And I agree with you there. This is a different kind of thing. And that's a subtlety you need to be doing body language for a little while to pick up. I mean, I've been doing it for a long, long time and probably never thought as much about that little flutter being processor before we all got together. So I want to learn from you, processor speed. I think it's a good way to look at it. Her respiration is up again. Why? We don't know why her respiration's up. It could be a lot of things. She does a disapproval lip, that pursing lips, when he asked about her parents coming straight there. It makes me wonder, was there some discussion that didn't go well or something else, the reason that happened? But she does this heavy, exasperated exhale and a qualifier of honestly right in there as well. First time we heard the word honestly. Okay, that might not mean anything. It might mean something dramatically different than we're thinking, but it comes up. And now they're starting to try to tie this to her for it being for her benefit in some kind of way. And that's when we see that. She does a short head stroke saying, I don't remember. Her mouth, and she touches her mouth with her hand. That's a big deal. And if you compare that short stroke of her head when she's saying, it was not any benefit to me, compared to when she was talking about her dad couldn't sleep, look at the difference in the two head nods. Those things indicate something is different going on inside her head. It could be there's a squabble, could be something else, could be that she has benefited from it, even if she didn't want, or it could be that she was involved in some way. We can't tell that. What we can tell is this. We also talk a lot about eye movement and baseline eye movement for recall. Here's a great one. Her eyes are fantastic for it because her eyes are so pronounced. And she has very small pupils, which means that the irises stand out. And she goes to her right for recall. You can't miss it over and over and over again. She's going to go to a different place a couple of times, and I'll point those out. She shows remorse, grief, or shame, don't know which, with that chin boss involvement when she's talking about her father sitting in the front to protect a place, something Chase and I were joking. We would never sit in a window to protect any place. That's just a silhouette waiting for something to happen. And then she's legalistic in her answers. Here's, if we book in my whole conversation about this, in the beginning, she's not that I remember, she's doing some odd answer. And then at the very end, she even clarifies which day you're talking about. That's more what we've seen in her baseline than that first one. So it makes it look awkward. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree. And this is the first time I've ever really talked about a baseline eye movement as well. I heard you talk about it. I was like, damn it. But it's kind of off to her right, which is great. And I think the attorney here might be using the word professor to increase the status of the victim, maybe to the jury. And right when she's saying, I don't remember the conversation, that's when we're seeing that eye flutter. And this is kind of like on a Windows computer when you go to Task Manager to kind of quit the stuff, quit a few apps to free up some space, or you click on the Apple and force quit so you can, get rid of some programs that are taking up stuff. And during the same statement, I don't remember the conversation, we're seeing an increase in upper body movement, that small head shaking, which is smaller than all the previous answers. And this is called a cluster of behavior. But this is the first genuine emotion that we've really seen on her face when the attorney's kind of contributing to these not really questions about her father being unable to sleep and protecting her there. And to this point, I'm really not seeing the following videos yet in my notes here. We are seeing some kind of grief there. This chin boss movement kind of comes up like this. And they even did a nonverbal behavioral study in New York City after 9/11. New Yorkers who are famous for not talking to each other would greet each other with that chin boss and a little bit of lip compression. And they called this the shared grief expression. So New Yorkers who didn't know each other would kind of give each other that look back and forth. Fascinating study. But I think there's some grief here. We don't know why. Maybe she did or participated in something to make her dad feel this way. Maybe she loves her dad, and this made her feel overwhelmed with emotion. Maybe she's feeling empathy for her dad, the level of stress that he's experiencing. Maybe there's a combination of a few of those. And one indicator that some emotions are truly genuine is that people try to hold them back and control them instead of displaying them. So pay attention to that. Is somebody kind of trying to hold back an emotion? It's more likely to be true if someone's attempting to control it. And the lawyer asked, did you bring all your belongings? I love that because it's the first time I think we're really hearing an actual question. That is a question with a question mark at the end. I just wanted to highlight that we're actually hearing one. But when she says, I thought we'd be back in a day or two, here's one quick pro tip for you, even though I hate that phrase. Always pay attention to any information that's injected in to an answer that has nothing to do with the question itself. These will always point in a very specific direction, no matter what conversation it is. If you just take a pile of everything that was injected that was not part of the question and then examine what that pile looks like afterward, they're going to point in a certain direction. And I would probably expect anybody to pack and leave town with their kids to get them some new memories after something happened to their dad. And this is understandable to me. Just leaving town, that might make sense. You left and you were not yourself. You realized you could not take care of the boys by yourself. These are just, all these statements are mildly frustrating. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, well, let me add one to that, which is the way the lawyer frames what I suspect is an argument as a fight. So a fight for me, it may not be the same for you, but a fight for me would be something that actually physically happens. There's some physical action that goes on. And an argument is something that happens verbally. Sounds like they had a verbal altercation, not a physical altercation, and yet the lawyer says a fight. So interesting how that's framed up there. Also interesting how her memory is not that clear now around everything to do with Charlie, I think it is. And there's no explanation around why this lack of memory there, where she's been quite good at explaining why she takes a certain route and the patterns there. I might expect if suddenly I'm good at being able to do some stuff and then suddenly I have a failure in one area, that I might go, look, I'm not remembering that bit so well because of X. Yeah, and people like us then may come along and kind of needle into that, of course, but no explanation for that. Now, this leaving town and going, I guess, going home, if her description is accurate, and it's kind of hearsay description, it's her account of things, so I don't know how true it is, but if her description is accurate, it sounds to me like she goes into shock. She seriously goes into shock. She can't eat. She can't look after her kids. There's a whole bunch of things there that say there has been some kind of trauma has gone on and she is in serious shock. Now, I don't know whether she's being accurate about that. She seems to come across as not anything out of baseline stress talking about that. So I would suspect it's accurate. So around this event, though she's been very relaxed around talking about the killing of her ex-husband, it seems like from her story at the time, it did have an effect on her, though it could be something to do with the effect that it had on her father. If that's where she's getting that grief, it could be, the shock could be around affecting her family and how scared they might have been. Anyway, all interesting stuff. Scott, what do you got on this one?
When she says, I don't remember the conversation, that right there we're hearing fading facts and her blink rate goes up. And she's not stressed because she's afraid of what's going to be asked next. She's stressed because these questions are important as to what she was doing and how she was involved with the questioning going forward, if that makes any sense at all. She sees it coming. She knows what's going to happen next. So what's interesting to me here, and Chase brought up the chin part, which going last, that gets knocked out of here. But we don't see any action in the brow. We see no grief from here up. We see nothing. There's no furrowing of the brow. There's nothing. But we do see that a little bit in the chin boss there. So maybe there's some grief there. And like you're saying, Chase, maybe she's trying to hold it back, and it could be true or whatever. And maybe she does feel bad about that it happened or whatever. But we're not seeing any grief on the billboard of emotion, which is the forehead and brow. We're not really seeing anything there. But an interesting cue we do see is that single shoulder shrug with the chin pointing toward the shoulder. I don't have any research to back this up. There are no papers I'm aware of, but from my experience and from talking to other interrogators and other experts like Joe Navarro, which is who I learned this from, quite often when you see that the single shoulder shrug and the chin go toward it, that indicates or denotes deception quite often. Not every time. Like I said, I like to give you on here. If you're a subscriber, if you hit like and are a subscriber and you're familiar with our stuff, we like to give you things that we've researched so we know exactly where it came from. We'll go back to the matrix with it, with you if you want to talk about it. And in this case, that I don't have that, only from what I've heard. So and my experience with it. So there's no research for that as far as I know. But I think she knew that she would be on this trip a little longer or a little less than she actually knew, but she said she packed for that amount of days, so it looked like she knew she was going for those amount of days. I don't know if that would make any difference or not with what happened, but something to me seems iffy there with her. And then once again, we're hearing fading facts when she says she hasn't had any she hasn't had any sleep for days and was terrified. So I'm under the impression she wasn't terrified. And I don't think she lost a bunch of sleep for days. And I think she did eat, because I think she mentions not eating either. But I think she's saying these things to help qualify her story and make it sound more believable and give it more punch.
One of those tape replays.
And you asked her to call Charlie and tell him what happened, right?
Yes.
You didn't speak with Charlie that day, right?
I don't think so.
On July 19th, the next day, you spoke to Charlie at 10:50 in the morning. Is that, you won't know the exact time, but do you recall speaking with him in the morning?
I honestly don't.
Do you recall letting him know that Professor Markel had passed away in the early morning?
I don't remember the conversation.
When your parents came directly to Tallahassee, correct?
They did.
They stopped in Orlando and they got there on the morning of the 19th, right?
Yes.
And when they got there, they were scared and frantic, right?
Yes.
Your dad didn't sleep. He couldn't get police protection, so he's planted his chair in the front of your window to make sure that no one was going to come to your house and shoot it up, right?
Correct.
Now, you all attended a memorial service on the 20th, right?
Yes.
And you arranged for the Markels to see the boys after the memorial service, right?
They all came over to my house.
And you left Tallahassee, correct?
Not on the 20th. No.
On the 21st.
Yes.
And when you left Tallahassee on the 21st, did you bring all your belongings?
I brought some swimsuits for the boys and some pajamas, and I thought we'd be back in a day or two.
And when you left, you were not yourself.
I was a mess.
You got to South Florida and you realized that you could not take care of the boys alone at this point in time.
I hadn't slept in days and I was terrified.
To get a little more specific, you wouldn't leave the house.
No.
And you would hardly eat.
I wasn't eating, no.
And ultimately, you decided not to come back to Tallahassee.
I mean, I made that decision much later, but...
If you like this video, get the full body language breakdown and analysis on our main channel by clicking this video right here.